You're listening to The Poetry Table, a segment of the Gather Poets podcast where I take you inside conversations with bold and gutsy poets exploring the craft choices, the questions, and the lived experiences that shape their poems. I'm your host, Maria Giesbrecht, a poet and the founder of Gather Poets, a writing community for poets worldwide. My guest today is Amiel Katz. Amiel is a Salvadoran poet from Houston, Texas. She roots her writing in historical research and reimagines just futures for migrants and marginalized identities. Her work is featured in Nowhere Girl Collective and is forthcoming in Horizon Review and Bat City Review. You can find her on Substack at Philomath4. Hello, Amiel. Welcome. How are you?
Hi, Maria. I'm doing well. Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much for being here. We have an incredible conversation to have, I suppose is the right way to say it, about a beautiful poem that we are so lucky and excited to publish this coming Friday. Amiel, would you like to start us off with reading your poem, Staying?
Yes, I'd love to. Okay. Staying. My people are suffering, like a body without water, tied to a post, softening after, and I saw their fear of government. My people are praying, apologizing, vomiting out sorrow for leaving a violent homeland. Is this not theirs? This country is made of my people. If they come for us, they'll come for you. Can I call upon your mouth to scream with us? Or is it muddied with fallen teeth? God bless. Thank you.
Snaps all around. Wow. I remember the first time I read this poem and I felt this sense of momentum kind of take over me as I was reading it. Like every line was just, it was like something that was tumbling down a hill. And I think when I feel that in a poem, it's when I know it's a very important poem. So Amiel, I would be really interested to hear just where your interior world and your exterior world, what it was like when you were writing this poem, or like how did it come to you? Where were you and what was that feeling like?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think it'd be good to start with like my background. For the past 3 years, I've been doing immigration law and I'm in the United States. And just recently, over the past months, seeing all of the arrests from ICE going on to Latinos in my community has been really like horrible and it just gives me so many emotions, especially with
Mm-mm.
having my family being Latino and being darker skinned than I am. And it's just a scary time in general. And so I think what kind of got me to write this poem is I had a law professor who I've been friends with for the past few years, and we were talking, and she told me how the law isn't being taken seriously right now, but it's the
Mm.
stories that we write and the narratives that we share that can actually change people's opinions and maybe start to make some movement going on. And so I kind of took her words and I thought, okay, what would I want people to know who maybe don't have the same views as me? And what do I want to say? Um, what call to action do I want them to have?
Hmm. Oh, that's so powerful. Um, I very much like resonate with the sentiment that Professor was talking to you about, the idea that story is compelling. Um, I even think sometimes story is more compelling than statistic. Like just hearing the statistics sometimes, like the statistics are so bad. Obviously, we know that. Like that it's, but our mind, I think, has such a hard time parsing through numbers. Even when like I went to accounting school and my mind still doesn't think in numbers. My mind thinks in narrative and in story. And I think that's exactly why your poem is so powerful, Amiel, is because you're leaning into the narrative. And I'm noticing so many things in your poem that feel urgent, not just the context of the poem and the subject matter, but even the way you're layering, like, my people are suffering, my people are praying. And then we have these like breaks in between the little phrases, the appositives of your poem. Um, I know I know these sentiments in your poem are urgent, but what does it feel like for you to write in a way that also mimics that? So, like, this, tell me about your craft decisions. Like, what is the thought behind using the slashes in between the appositives? And is that maybe how you, did you use that to create that sense of urgency?
Yeah, so I think I'll start with like my writing process-ish, which is just I start with really big emotions most of the time, and then I
Hmm.
mind map them. So I find words that maybe correlate to them, and I just start making connections and it's like the guts of a poem, I like to call it. Like that's all the like
Hmm.
crazy messy stuff. And then once I have that, I start thinking, okay, how am I going to structure this? What is the form? And I
Hmm.
love using slashes because I remember the US poet laureate Arthur C. said that, you know, a poem is a place where there's like, you can slow down. And I think the
Hmm.
slashes is what does that. It makes the eyes slow down and think, okay, what did I just read? And why is there a pause here? And
Hmm.
so I have a lot of slashes in this poem because I kind of want it to have that kind of like a steady drum beat, like, but it
Hmm.
gets faster and faster as, you know, the segments become shorter in each stanza. And so I think that's what I was thinking of. And I think for like the urgency, I tried to do the repetition of my people, but I wanted it to be spaced out so there was room for the reader to really sit with the emotions that are going on. So, you know, you're sitting with my people are tied to a post. Okay, let me sit with that for a second. And then the next stanza is my people are praying, they're vomiting. Like that,
Hmm.
those are different emotions. So the slashes kind of make you stop and like make connections from stanza to stanza.
Hmm. Yeah, I think that that definitely resonates when I read it the first time too. And it's different, and it I think a slash is different than a line break, because a line break is something that we kind of have expected, or we expect in a poem, but there's a little bit of an unexpectedness to your slashes, Amiel, and especially like near the end. um is it muddied with fallen teeth, God less. Like, I think that's an unexpected way to break that line. Like, if we broke that line just by with traditional line breaks instead of slashes, I'm not sure that you would have gotten that sort of pause and slowing down in the same way that that last line does with the slashes really beautifully. Um, Speaking of the last line, Amiel, I'm curious to know about God less at the end of your poem, because the first time I read it, for some reason, my mind immediately went to God bless as like a way that we finish a conversation. Um, and so I thought it was interesting that you finished your poem with God bless. And I wondered if it was a nod or a subtle way to reference God bless, but instead, obviously, with the context, it's God less. Um, and am I just doing the thing that poets do, which is like read into these little things?
Well,
But I'm curious.
I'll
Tell me
I'll
about
be
it.
honest, so I was not thinking of that, but I think that's a really cool interpretation of my poem. I was actually inspired by the Gather Poets session on the divine, and I really was thinking, okay, when I think of like a God poem, as you know, so many people have their different relationships to God or like a higher being or something.
Mhm.
And I wanted to think like how can I call to the reader to consider, are they doing enough? Is there enough action going on? And if there's not, like, are they in line with their beliefs with their higher power? So that's kind of what I was thinking
Mm.
of, because I was thinking like, well, if you're not joining us to say anything or do something about it, well, I was I decided to be really kind of vulnerable and kind of speak my mind and just went with godless, like you're just not we're not
Mhm.
in line in that way.
Hmm. Yeah, I think that's very vulnerable for you as the writer to write, but also for the speaker of this poem to kind of declare at the end, godless. But I think from what I can tell, just chatting with you a little bit, I love your sort of philosophy around poetry being the stepping stone to action, like poetry not being the action, but being like the call to action, like something comes after. And I know you touched on this a little bit during the Substack interview, which
Mhm.
will be posted on our Substack in print in addition to this podcast. Do you want to talk a little bit more about your thought process behind that idea or what that means to you for poetry to be that call to action?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think I'll start a way to answer this is kind of how I got into poetry, which is I got into poetry my first semester of undergrad. I took a class called Radical Education, and I learned about the Black Panthers in the
Mm,
United States. And I read Erica Huggins' poems that she wrote when she was part of the leadership of that organization. And it was kind of this philosophy that, like, okay, we're gonna put all our emotions into this poem and we're gonna say what's going on and what's wrong, but this is, like, not the end all be all. Once
mm,
we, you know, let others read our work and we get to discuss and talk about our work, what happens after that? Like, the momentum shouldn't stop there. And I think I've
mhm,
really just, like, loved that so much, especially, like, as being an advocate for so long, like, I think it's important to share the stories, it's important to get people thinking, but I think sometimes if we don't take that extra step after that, that's when action lulls and, like, movements stop. And
mhm,
so that's why I really, wanted to be so forward in this poem about having a call to action, to really say, "We need to do something right now,"
mhm.
and, um, I just want to be, like, really upfront about that, so, yeah, that was kind of what I was thinking.
I appreciate that so much. And it reminds me of a conversation that I had with some other writers this fall at the Toronto International Festival of Authors. And one of the discussions, the panel discussions, was about whether poetry or all writing in general is activism. And a few of the points that were brought up were that like it can be a form of activism, but it can also be like a false high to write a poem or a book, and then it doesn't actually it's not followed by being out in the streets or caring for our neighbors or caring for the people in our communities. And so I really appreciate that there's an understanding in your poem that the poem is like one part of a larger thing. And I think that's really important to keep in mind for like writing just in general. Because sometimes I think it can feel good to write a poem that feels like it will change something. And I'm not saying that it won't, but I think it, you're right in the sense that it's the first step and then something comes after. And it doesn't excuse us from all of the other aspects that come with being an activist, I think. Um, but yeah, I really appreciate that, Amiel. Um, I want to continue to talk about the end of your poem.
Okay.
Not to drag it on, but
No.
just in general. um, actually, I would love to drag it on because I could talk about your ending for hours. um,
Thank you.
just in general, what are your thoughts about ending a poem, or how do you feel and know within in you as a writer or as a poet that a poem feels complete, or when do you put it aside and feel that you are satisfied with your poem?
I definitely struggle with this so hard. It is so hard to end a poem. I actually am really bad at having a beginning, middle, and end. I kinda just have, like, a middle and then I stop. Um, but I think for this poem, it was easier because of that whole call to action. I was like,
Mhm.
okay, like this is the ending. It's going to be a culmination of all these feelings into like something that can happen later. Um, but I think in other poems, I really lately have just been trying to craft a story, and I'm really trying to learn how to do
Mm.
that. And so I recently wrote this poem called Elegy, and it's about border crossing in the United States, and it was a love story between two coyotes. And
Oh.
that was kind of like a motif to like migrants are natural and they're part of like the earth.
Mm.
And I kind of like leaned into like my love for reading fiction, and I was like,
Mhm.
okay, how do fiction writers write a story? And then how can I do that in 2 pages?
Mhm.
So I tried really hard just to think about like, you know, what what am I trying to say?
Mm.
And I think in all my poems, they're, like, super political, so
Mm.
I feel like I have an easy out in that my ending can just be something super political and like a call to action, but if it's not, I like to sometimes leave with uneasy feelings, I think,
Mm.
like, with this poem, like, "Godless," like, that can make you feel uneasy, especially if this poem makes you feel guilty for not having done anything. And so I
Mm.
think, I want people to wrestle with these tough feelings, because I think that's what makes us start thinking, "Okay, maybe, like, I could do something differently, or maybe
Mm.
I could think about this in another way." And so that's kinda what I was thinking.
Mm. I think having the courage to make your reader uncomfortable is really wonderful. And I think it's like an intuition that some writers have that, in a way, almost you have to have more trust for your reader because you have to trust that they're going to be okay with feeling uncomfortable. And as a recovering people pleaser, I think that's something that I really like struggled with is like, oh, someone's going to read my poem and they're going to be really uncomfortable. I don't want to make them uncomfortable. But I really love hearing you say that because I think that's like permission for us as writers um to create discomfort, and I think discomfort maybe is a catalyst sometimes for change. Maybe always, I don't know if there is change without
Yeah.
discomfort.
I
um
don't
yeah.
I don't know, maybe you're onto something here. Yeah.
Sorry,
But,
I'm coughing.
no, you're okay. I was gonna say, like, I think a lot of times I think about poems that really move me, and those make me feel big emotions. And I
Mm,
think, like, I really, like, want to embody that. I want to take that leap and, like, be courageous, brave, and just, like,
mhm,
if it doesn't resonate with everyone, like, that's okay. And I think that's
mhm,
something I tell myself as a writer is, like, my writing might not be for everyone, and that's perfectly fine. Like, you know, um, that's it's okay.
mhm. That's a really good reminder, I think, just especially now that we're going into a new year and many people are making goals for like submitting to lip mags and
Mhm.
submitting to poetry contests and stuff. Um, it reminds me of there's a poetry prize right now. I think it's with Palette Poetry, and it's called the
Oh,
Rejected
yeah.
Poetry Prize. And it's you can send in your poems that have been rejected by everyone else. And I love that concept because what they're saying is there might be a home for your rejection here. And I think it's never a matter of like whether that poem was good. And I don't even like to think about poetry being as good or not good because I think that's just like not a helpful binary.
Mhm.
But it's just about finding the right home for it and finding the right reader for it. And yeah, I think like it's usually just a matter of finding the people who want to read your poetry. But I can't stop thinking about these two coyotes, Amiel. So whenever you write that poem, or have you
So
released it into the world at all somewhere?
So I've submitted that poem to different, like, contests, but this year it will be out. So that's in a long
Oh,
time. But
oh my
yeah,
gosh.
it will, we'll see how it goes, but, you know, my thing is I really love, like the story that I wrote. So even if it doesn't get like accepted into certain lit mags, like that's okay. I'm still
Mhm.
gonna try my best to refine it, and then I'll probably
Yeah.
just post it on my Substack.
Ah, I'm so excited. Yeah, we need updates, so message me whenever the coyote poem comes out.
Okay,
Uh,
sure.
I love that so much. Amiel, I just want to say thanks so much for chatting today. I've had such a fun time kind of parsing through your poem and talking about poetry in general. I find it's such a treat these days to just have conversations with other people who write. It's really unique. It's rare, I think.
Yeah,
Um,
for sure.
so I just really appreciate you coming onto the podcast. I wanted to give you an opportunity to chat about maybe where we could find you online if folks are wanting to also stay tuned for your coyote poem.
Yeah,
I think you're on Substack for the most part. Do you want to
yes, I'm on
share?
Substack at Philomath4, and then my Instagram is just my name, Amiel.Katz, so you can find me there too. Um, but yeah, I love chatting with people, so feel free.
Amazing. Well, and if you're listening right now, Amiel's poem will be published on Friday, and an interview with her will be up on our Substack, and it will be cross-posted to hers, so you can read it either on her Substack or on our Substack. Thanks again, Amiel. I look forward to publishing your poem and also reading your coyote poem. Thank you for joining us for this episode of the Poetry Table. If you're curious about Gather, feel free to find us on Instagram at Gather Poets, and we look forward to connecting.